Next one, okay, this is the big one. So second item for the departmental report, we're gonna talk about our work plan update. As most of us know, but not everybody, the Traffic Safety Commission is required, can say required, that we come up with a work plan for this year. So the council approves it, and then we can go from there. This is our first kind of very, very rough draft, just bullets of what we are thinking to put into it. And then we're gonna open for public comments on it after it's presented and discussed.
Thank you. So there's a lot in this one. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, and we're kind of in new territory. So this new work plan that's required from City Council is a new requirement. So I kind of want to walk through several things and try to put everything into order, and then we're going to review what the information I've received, and then deliberate a little bit. So the City Council's role is to make policy. They direct the city manager to implement the policy, and then they solicit input from the boards and commissions and committees in their area of expertise. So traffic safety for now is this commission, but there is a intent to change the name and revise our specific area expertise to expand it to mobility. So that's what the City Council does. The Advisory Board, Traffic Safety Commission, your role is to advise City Council on policy that assists Council in carrying out its responsibilities. You provide citizen input, like you had this evening, and being a positive representative of the City Council and the community. So I don't want to say you don't agree with the policy, but there's a conflict. You know, you have to realize that the City Council sets the policy. So that's not your job. So we separate who sets the policy, and then the Traffic Safety Commission is going to take a look at that policy and say, okay, get public input, make recommendations on things that come forward to you in regards to their policies. And then the city staff, we research and investigate issues, prepare alternatives and recommendations for the TSC and the City Council to review and implement the council policy decisions. I am your staff liaison for the time being, and we have clerical support for the TSC under the guidance of the department head, who was Paz, who you met earlier, the Public Works Director, and ultimately she reports ultimately to the city manager. So part of this work plan is to kind of, to put it in perspective, is kind of stay in our lane. So to take an extreme case, we wouldn't start talking about land use decisions. We wouldn't start talking about the heights of buildings in the village. So, you know, and the idea is that since we only have so much time, we want to make sure that not only do we stay in our lane, but that we have a good work plan that's very specific, and we don't go out and spend time on things and not get to the more important things. So we're going to identify these important things as a group, staff and the Traffic Safety Commission, and when we get to a point where you can approve it, then we bring it to City Council. And they're the ones that really are going to define what we do as a commission, but we have the input, and they will read it and either agree with it or amend it, and we'll go from there. So the directive from the City Council requires us to submit an annual work plan of anticipated activities for the coming year. I believe it's a calendar year, but again, this is kind of a first thing, so it could be a fiscal year, and it starts July 1st, but regardless, we have 12 months to get this thing done. I don't think it's not in a formal as knowing what the date of it that it gets approved, but it gives us 12 months. It's intended to encourage and increase a dialogue between the commissions and the City Council. This is our way to communicate to them concerns, desires, recommendations. And that'll be a regular report that goes from this commission towards the City Council, specifically on how far and what progress we're making on our work plan. The City Council will review, amend as necessary, and approve the work plan we submit and that you have approved. The work plan should align with City Council priorities. City Council goal. there is a specific goal to amend the duties of the Traffic Safety Commission to include advising the City Council on matters related to implementation of the general plan mobility element. So that might end up being a change in our Muni code to say specifically that or something similar to that. It might give us a new name like Mobility Safety Commission or Mobility Commission, but it'll be somewhat similar to that with that goal. Currently, the Traffic Safety Commission has the following duties: to review studies and make recommendations to City Council on matters involving traffic and pedestrian safety. No mention of bikes or transit, so you can see we need to amend this, but this is what's in the Muni Code as of right now, and it takes City Council action to change these duties. It's not easy, but we're going to do it. Provide a public forum to review citizen complaints and requests regarding traffic and pedestrian safety. Provide recommendations for revisions to the city codes and plans on matters involving traffic and pedestrian safety, parking, and school safety. And then I put this in, it's not in the Muni Code, but for example, the speed limit, stop signs, traffic signals, and parking restrictions. That's traditionally what we've been focused on here. The general, so we are intended to help the implementation of the mobility plan. So I put down the general plan mobility goals. There's goals or objectives. So I can read those. I guess I'll go through it. Keep Carlsbad moving with livable streets that provide a safe, balanced, cost-effective, multimodal transportation system, accommodating the mobility needs of all community members. Improve connectivity for residents, visitors, and businesses. Provide inviting streetscapes and encourage walking and promote livable streets. Manage parking to support all modes of transportation and ensure efficient use of land. Implement transportation demand and traffic signal management techniques to improve mobility. Protect and enhance the visual, environmental, and historic characteristics of Carlsbad through sensitive planning and design of scenic transportation corridors. Provide for the safe and efficient movement of goods throughout the city. Those are what are in the general plan that's already been approved. Those are essentially goals, policies that the City Council has approved. You've been asked to help implement that. Typically, with our work through the police, we try to focus on the 3 E's, what we call the 3 E's: education, enforcement, and engineering. We think that's kind of how we've organized to this point presentations to you. You know, what can we do in terms of education, what can we do in terms of enforcement, and what can we do for engineering? And that's somewhat what we're thinking about how to organize our work plan into. For an item, we'll say, okay, here's an item we want to work on. What can we do in terms of education, enforcement, and engineering? So the task ahead is to create a work plan, and since it's really hard to, at this point, say what's in each bucket, there's really 3 buckets of tasks that we have, and that's to create a work plan. But while we're talking about that, I am sure we are going to be talking about procedures that we might include in our TSC bylaws on how we do things. And then, of course, we may be changing, or what you propose may directly affect what we do to change the municipal code regarding the TSC duties. So when we talk about this, I have no problem about saying, no, don't talk about that, it's a bylaw, don't talk about that, it's a Muni Code. While we discuss this stuff, bring all of your ideas together, and then I'm going to put them into those 3 buckets. And then we'll take the bucket that we've defined to be the work plan. City staff will develop a work plan draft and then present it back to you. That's when we can start getting into, I think, the nitty-gritty and start discussing in great detail. In advance of that, I asked the commissioners to provide input for what you thought were ideas. And we have been asked the last couple of meetings to say, well, what's going on? What have you heard? So this is really a sharing of this information. There's no prioritization here. There's no names associated with these. It's fine if you want to take credit for it, but quite a few of these were proposed by more than one person, one commissioner. And I can continue to receive the data, either recommendations, either tonight or after tonight until the work plan is approved. So with that, again, with no prioritization, this is what I heard. It's very condensed, and we can talk about it a little bit to clarify it. But I tried to make it so that we didn't have a 20-page PowerPoint. So one was a Vision Zero, and that's somewhat of a detailed thing, but it's a program designed to reduce collisions and focus on fatalities, and it relates to school area safety too. Safe routes to school, things like that. It would be maybe a formal program, but that's the Vision Zero that I heard. Another one was to look at an ad hoc committee to assist neighborhoods reach consensus on Carlsbad Residential Traffic Management Program. So each project that comes in needs to build consensus in the neighborhood, and so an ad hoc committee would be a subset of commissioners that does not have the ability to vote, so they would be ad hoc, less than a majority. That's all I can say about that one that I know. Third, traffic calming on non-residential streets. Right now the CRTMP is limited to streets that meet the 25-mile-per-hour roadway classification. So there's a lot of things there, but for one is width of 40 feet, curb face to curb face, and a certain density of driveways, and a certain length of driveways. So if it doesn't meet that and it doesn't have a 25-mile-per-hour, it is a non-residential street. So one of the recommendations is to come up with a plan for traffic calming on those streets that don't follow the CRTMP. And perhaps we can take a pause, and then maybe after each of these slides, I can ask for any questions from you that clarify it, not to deliberate or to sale. There are no sales points here because you haven't heard from the public, but if there's something there that you could say, what do you mean by ad hoc or Vision Zero, and perhaps the person, this is kind of where I'm going to flip the tables on you, because I don't know anything more than I wrote up there. So whoever came up with it or whoever would like to can maybe clarify, but again, not a sales pitch, but just clarify if there is a specific question. So
Yeah.
maybe we'll go slide by slide.
Okay, so we're going to start to my far left. If you have questions or if you don't have questions, just whatever your comments, anything on this 4 bullet or 3 bullet points. And then hopefully we remember which one came up with that bullet point and be able to answer. That's the key.
Yes.
I'll start. I have a question.
I was going to start with jumping. Let's start far left.
Are we discussing the 3 bullets?
Just
Right?
yes.
Any of those 3 bullets first.
We're not discussing, we're
Or
just asking.
Ask
Ask
questions.
clarifying questions.
No questions for these. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess don't have any specific questions about these, but I have a more general question, or 2 questions. Are the municipal code and bylaw revisions part of the work plan, or are they separate? And then the follow-up question to that is, if they're separate things, what is the timeline for, like, municipal code? Our goal is to get it revised by this date. The bylaws, we want it revised by this date, and the work plan we want completed by a 3rd date.
All good questions. So yeah, there is no deadline on any of those 3, and we haven't been really given direction on which one comes first, second, or third. Our opinion and our approach is, first let's see what the work plan is, because as we talk about the work plan, it could possibly change or bring up some questions about what the TSC should be doing in terms of the Muni code. So we thought we would start with the work plan, get that done in months, and then quickly come back with the Muni code, and that might even be at the same time because we're going to be gathering the information, but the Muni code does not get approved by the TSC. That goes directly to the city council, so that would be, if they ask for our opinion, we would maybe be able to make some recommendations based on what we heard, but that's kind of separate, and I don't know if that will come back to you, but the bylaws is completely under your control. The question with that one is, we're not sure how much is going to be left for commissioners to have in their bylaws, because right now, each commission has different bylaws, and my understanding is there's going to be somewhat of an effort to uniform the commissions. So there could be a muni code that changes and says, everyone will be given 3 minutes. Things like that, there could be just an umbrella muni code change that makes a lot of the things that are currently in our bylaws moot. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna kind of wait and see, especially on the bylaws. That'll be the last thing we do because we don't know how much latitude we're gonna have until those are made. That make sense? Okay.
He doesn't look convinced.
I'm not necessarily convinced, but I can talk about that after public comment and try to persuade otherwise.
Okay.
Commissioner Becerra?
Yeah. Could you explain that ad hoc committee on the second item? Like how much, you said less than the number of, a majority of the people, but there would be volunteers within our group that would go and meet with the homeowners associations or whichever group brought these things to us. Is that the idea?
The only problem, see, I don't know. All I know is that I know what an ad hoc committee is, so I don't know if the person that proposed it had the same thought of what an ad hoc committee is. Hopefully it isn't Bill Fowler, Commissioner Fowler, because he might be the only one that could convince us. But let's just say that's very specific. But I think the idea is to help what can we do to help the communities reach a consensus as part of that voting process. But I don't know, does anybody, was anybody here, I think it might have been Bill that's submitted that, but an ad hoc committee, by its definition, if you use the definition right, it has to be less than a majority, and there's a lot of strings attached to that. So we'd have to get to the details, but I think the idea is, a work plan might be a little bit higher than that. That's very specific. It might be, what can we do to help the community build a consensus? I would say that's kind of the language, we would have in our work plan. Revise it so that it's easier. Maybe this commission could say, let's look at the CRTMP and take a deeper look at it and see what we can do to help them reach consensus.
Now I remember that we sent you an email, individual,
Yes.
the bullet points. And that's why, like some of this, we have discussed some, and you wrote them down, but some of us just sent you individually. That's why I'm like, I never heard of this in any of the meetings that we had. And it is because maybe Mr. Fowler sent it to you directly. So
And that's why, because had you all talked about it before this meeting, you would have been in violation of the Brown Act. So that's exactly,
favorite.
you should be very surprising to anybody except for the person that sent it to me. So, hope that makes sense. That's what this is really what it was, because I think at least one commissioner or another, or a couple, said, I want to know what everybody else is thinking. Let's get out there. So that's what we're doing.
It's great.
And the reason why it has to be less than majority is Brown Act again.
Okay.
So
Right.
if you had 4 of us going and meeting with the residents, now you've actually got a meeting of the Traffic Safety Commission.
Then they would have to actually come here in front of the state.
So it has to be a subset thereof in order because of Mona's favorite act, the Brown Act.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple other things. So again, I don't want to speak for Bill, but an ad hoc committee has to have a limited time frame, a specific time frame. So
Purpose, yeah.
I don't know if that's the right word, so I wouldn't get focused on that, but I think I would say, speaking for Bill, let's find a way, let's review the CRTMP to see how we can just review it. And that could be one of the things we look at in that review.
Could the ad hoc committee also include somebody from the city staff?
Well, the city staff does meet with them. I mean, that's kind of their role, is to build that consensus, so.
But no, it's a subset of this. That would be, the actual ad hoc is a subset of this.
Right.
That doesn't mean city staff couldn't be there also, but and we're not discussing, we're just clarifying.
Yeah, the city staff does go there, and that's kind of their job, is to help build consensus, but, sometimes there's the addition of a council or a commissioner could help. But it's a little bit dicey, I think, to have a subset with that on a regular basis. I don't know if you can do that long-term, so let's not worry about the ad hoc term, but I think to improve or find ways to build consensus.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hunter?
No questions.
Can you tell me the Vision Zero, is that a city policy document or state level?
Well, I'm gonna, I believe Pete might have had that, but as of right now, it's not something the city has approved, but it is let's call it a movement, or it's a common program that cities have done. They just do it in different ways, but I'll hand it off to you.
City of San Diego has one. They originated actually in Scandinavia, so it was either Sweden or Norway. And it's generally a long-term program that focuses on trying to reduce traffic fatalities to zero. And so since that's a pretty difficult thing to get exactly there, it's generally very long-term. The City of San Diego has developed a program that's probably based on others that have preceded them. And one of the things that showed up in the newspaper recently is that they've looked at intersections where there have been a number of fatalities, and they're making changes to those intersections to attempt to reduce the pedestrian fatalities at those intersections. So crosswalks are marked differently, maybe rapid flashing beacons. I don't know what specific things they do, but those are the types of things that come out of an evaluation process. So you look at where things are happening, why they're happening, and then you try and do something about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, all my questions have been answered, so that's why I like to go around and be the last one. So let's move to the next slide.
That's one slide.
I know, and only 3 minutes.
Some of these are real simple though, so maybe it's like easy. Next slide on conduct educational events, establish protocol for reviewing roundabouts in lieu of traffic signals and stop signs, investigate innovative approaches to assist enforcement, such as DUI and distracted driver programs, and equalize the rights of all roadway users. I might even ask a little clarification on that, but that's what I have. So if we want to go another round?
Yes.
Yeah, question on that first bullet point on the conduct educational events. Is there specifics to that, or is this just general?
I think it was a discussion between all of us, but I think
Yes.
Commissioner Valencia, pretty much what we were talking, and the police department is doing already a great job. So there are 2 incidents, either at the schools to educate the students, and then also educate mainly we're talking about the pedestrians, but then also educate the drivers before they penalize them. And then also we discussed about educating the tourists on the coastal corridor and educating just pretty much the public that's around the beach in the summertime. People that are not usually comfortable or they know our streets and our crossings and so on.
And that was, if I can add to that, an excellent explanation. That's really where, if you look at the couple slides before, we said, we really do education, enforcement, and engineering. So we kind of took that to heart and said, we're going to organize that. So consider that one going to be part of our work plan insofar as we'll organize it, and then you might identify projects, and then we'll put that education as a part. And an event would be exactly like the chair said.
Commissioner Nikki.
I don't have any questions on these.
Commissioner Valencia.
No questions.
I'm good.
Okay.
I have a question on investigate innovative approaches to assist enforcement.
Was anybody there that did that one? Or the last one, equalize the rights of all roadway users? Was that, maybe those were both Bill. Was that, did you have any input on those?
Was his list like this big and we
It
only
was
had
it was a
like
big
one?
list.
It's
I
missing.
won't say anything. I'm not gonna personalize these. I wish he was here.
Guilty person.
I believe for instance, we, and it may came, I'm not gonna talk to him, but if I were to look at that, I believe the police, last summer did a sting operation for pedestrian or bicyclists not yielding to pedestrians. So that would be something that we would work with PD, and again, it's the second E. So I think that is gonna be ingrained. I think we've taken it to heart and said, okay, that's the second E, which is, look at ways to work with police to come up with enforcement.
I don't want to step out of procedure, but I do have something to add to that, if that's okay. So we just
You can
recently.
introduce yourself, I'm sorry.
Okay,
This is-
sorry, I'm John Boyce, I'm the acting sergeant for the police department. We just recently applied for California Traffic Safety Grant. So what that entails is the county, so the Sheriff's Department, San Diego PD, La Mesa PD, pretty much every agency in the county has applied for this grant. They already have it, so hopefully by the summer we'll have the grant. So what that entails is if we have any issues such as speeders, bicycle violations like the lady mentioned, we can pull from that grant and pretty much every traffic agency in the county will come into the city and assist with enforcement. So we're waiting to hear that, so hopefully by the summer that grant will be approved.
Yeah, that's great.
And then last, the equalize the rights of all roadway users, I'm guessing that would mean we're biased towards autos right now. So the right of way would be, and it gets, I believe, to the ideas of complete streets. So you don't take away you don't overemphasize one mode over the other. You try to share the right of way that you have. So you narrow the lanes to increase the bike widths. You don't take away lanes on Palomar Airport Road so that the traffic all goes to residential side streets. So I believe that's what that means.
Okay,
We have the next slide.
we can move on to the next slide.
Okay, review all striping plans to identify ways to further complete streets goals. To further the complete streets goals, such as every time there's a pavement management project, that it would come forward to this group, and they would look at the striping, and maybe tying into other things. You wouldn't start going into pavement analysis because that's not staying in your lane, but it could be to say, okay, I think we should do more, that's too narrow for a car, or wide, or do we have standards, and were they adequately applied? So that would be that one. Review policies regarding shared transportation services. We talked about that, so what is the review the current policies in place for scooter rentals and ride-sharing services, things like that. We could define it better, but I think that covers that request. And review current prohibitions of bike use on sidewalks. Currently, the Muni Code prohibits bike use on sidewalks, so we would, according to this, we would review that. I think those two could be kind of combined together to look at policies regarding transportation. That's kind of what I'm looking at as a work plan item. I'm not going to propose it, but I'm giving you an idea of what the level would be. I wouldn't put down two different ones. I kind of merge two or more of these into overarching.
Yeah, it looks like some of them are kind of duplicate.
Yes.
So they could be combined in more than one. Do you have any questions? This one's pretty simple.
Just on the question for those 2 bullet points, this is targeting, or specifically, when you say scooters, we're talking about e-scooters or e-bikes. And then also on the 3rd point, review current prohibitions of bike use on sidewalks. Is it also in regards to scooters too? Like, would that be e-scooters or
So the scooters, can you explain more about why did you bring that up with the scooters? What was your concern?
It's been in the newspapers. San Diego has had a huge problems. Also Coronado has had them. Not only because it impacts the safety of the pedestrians on the sidewalk, they also leave many leftover scooters on the street. I personally have been downtown and I've seen as many as 10, 15 on a corner. And so it blocks the pedestrians' walkway. It's a safety issue not only for pedestrians walking, but, then if you add bicycles and all, it just,
So it
Yeah.
seems that her, Vice Chair Johnson's concern is more of the regulation of the companies that are renting the scooters?
I believe.
Because it's not individuals, a person just owning a scooter and
No,
their
no.
ability to move
Right,
around,
yeah.
right?
Right. I believe you said that right now it's prohibited to have any scooters in the village area. I believe what you told us before.
I believe there's something about, there's a couple different muni codes. And I believe one of them is how the business, they'd have to go to get a business license. I think that was the question, is could a company in the village come in and do that? And I believe the answer was they need a business license, and right now the city has some guidance on that. But I think that's, let's keep it, instead of making that discussion now, I think what the idea is the work plan perhaps should look at muni codes, and we can separate it between where the proper use of modes and
location of
rental, including rental, and just see if our muni codes cover that adequately.
If we expanded it, instead of just one area, who knows? Look at it.
Right, so I think that's what I would say, is we just would look at a muni code instead of just looking at the muni code in the village to
Right.
see if, bicycles. But I think again, the second and third together would say, do we adequately consider bike use and scooter use and skateboard? Because I know there's some restrictions on the skateboard use in certain areas where there's signage, and we could just review that instead of telling you where we are today would be a review of that.
And I believe that the last one, the bike use on the sidewalk, it came off before, because there are certain, I believe it was a roundabout intersection where the biker has to go, or is it?
They have the option
They have the
to
option to go on
mount.
the sidewalk, so as the law is currently, that would be illegal.
Right.
So, they're caught in a very bind there.
There's also an issue on age, so if you've got your 3-year-old with you and they're on their bike, can they be on the bike on the sidewalk, or do you have to put the 3-year-old on a bike in the street? And so again, there's a few things that there, that's not mine, that was a Fred one.
Yeah, and I mean, right now, those roundabouts, to be legal, you would mount the curb, get off your bike, walk it through the roundabout, go off the curb, go back into the bike lane and bike. So, without getting into that discussion, that's what this is about. Let's look at those policies and see if there's anything. I think I would just go at overarching and review all policies and see if there's something missing or something needs to be revised or added.
Karen? Commissioner, thank you.
I think that answered most of my questions. My questions were related to the other modes of travel, I guess, that aren't talked about as much. Like, we talk about pedestrians, bicycles, and cars, but scooters, I know there's e-bikes too, and where they're allowed to go and where they should be going. So I think that's been covered, but that was my question.
Thank you. Commissioner Garcia?
No questions.
Good.
I just have a little picky thing. I think complete streets should be capitalized in the first bullet. Right.
Okay. Ready to move to the next slide?
Yes. Evaluate high-profile intersections for level of service, signal timing, collision rates. Study pedestrian crossings along Carlsbad Boulevard. Develop a coastal corridor master plan. Ensure adequate data is provided when projects are presented to the Traffic Safety Commission.
Questions?
No questions.
No questions.
Commissioner Garcia?
No questions.
No questions.
No.
No. Most of these are mine, so I was ready to answer some questions. Okay, well, I don't have, developing the coastal corridor master plan, do we have any details, like what?
It would be a new document. There's been a lot of work along the coastal corridor. And for the most part, there's been certain sections dealt with, and I think that'd be a major undertaking, but I believe what we're talking about is something for the whole coastal corridor, to take a look at as a holistically, if I'm not mistaken. So that, again, if we did that, that would cover the pedestrian crossings on, it would take care of a lot of things, the speed limits that you heard about earlier, things like that, but then it's a much bigger upbringing and maybe something that council may think that's a little bit too much right now, but that's not to say one thing or the other. I'm just saying that the scale of that's going to be one where I think the scale of it will be interesting. We'll have to deal with how much of it, how deep to go into a coastal corridor plan.
Okay. Ready for the next slide?
City Council report on citizen requests. And now I'm not sure, but our regular dialogue with the City Council, we do provide minutes, and so everybody that speaks at the City Council now is put in the minutes and briefly discuss what their issue is, and then these meetings are recorded. So Council can, and I'm sure they do, review the minutes and who has spoken here. And then we're going to have a quarterly report or regular report back to the council on our work plan. So I believe this one is more like, yes, we will be doing that in some form or another, and that might be, what our regular report to the city council is. But that's how I interpret that. Rename the Traffic Safety Commission to reflect all mobility issues. So right now, we're only about traffic safety by definition, and if you remember those, the Muni Code says, it has to do with safety. So, literally, if it doesn't have to do with safety, you don't have the authority or the direction to speak about it. So I believe this one means, let's talk about as opposed to the Mobility Safety Commission, maybe call it the Mobility Commission. That's how I interpreted it, but if there's a correction on that, please help me out on that. And then again, protocols for setting agenda and establishing standards for review. Breaking that up, there's some bylaw stuff there, but I think establishing standards for review is something, and how we go about setting the agenda. I think that's more Muni Code and our bylaws, if the Muni Code won't take care of that. So the City Council has a little bit more definition. The Muni Code covers how City Council members put things on the agenda, and if they can, isolated commissioners can, or City Council members can add something on the agenda. I think there's some clause in there on how they would do it without a majority vote, but for now, what we do is a majority vote. This would say, hey, let's clarify that, let's have some clear protocol. And when we get a standard for review, what do we review? How much do we review it? What's your expectations? That would be clarified. I believe that's probably more of a bylaws thing, but again, we can talk about it here, and if it's important to you, first of all, we'll find out that it's important to you, and then we'll find out where it belongs in those three buckets.
No questions.
No questions. No questions?
No questions?
No question.
I got no questions.
Say no questions.
No questions.
Last slide. So review and establish evaluation methods such as level of service and safety. I believe that's similar to what we just talked about in the previous bullet, but a separate bullet here. Develop a plan to monitor the system. We do have that in place, but I believe that would be more of let's review what the growth management program monitors and how we monitor it. Review the following plans and programs: travel demand management, transportation systems management, and sustainable mobility plan. Those I kind of grouped together. I saw those in different requests. And those are three items that it could be more, but the TDM and TSM are specifically in the mobility element in the general plan. And the sustainable mobility plan is something that I'm sure you'll be reviewing and will be brought to you, but this would be a formal request for it.
Questions?
No questions?
No questions? So the SMP is really,
Sorry, thank you. It says SPM, it's supposed to be SMP, is that right?
Absolutely.
SPM.
Develop a plan to monitor what system?
That was a quote, but I believe it's the transportation, sort of the mobility system, the circulation system, if you will. So all modes, I would imagine. That's what we intend to do with the growth management program. Well, not all modes, but without going into it, but I think that's the idea is, you know, we would monitor it and bring results to you, and you would take a look at how we monitor that system.
Flow and things like that? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, traffic flow, pedestrian, bicycle, transit, TDM.
System seems a little weird.
With Chuck, I wasn't clear what system, so if you could clarify that a little bit. Transportation system,
I see
mobility.
Steve,
Mobility.
maybe that was you who
I
submitted it?
think that was my submission. My thing was much longer than that. But yeah, effectively, what I was saying is we had a program in the past at least where vehicle congestion was monitored throughout at various points in the city, just to get an idea of how things were going. So the idea was that we would monitor both the level of service and safety levels for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists at various points in the city, just so that we stay up to date on where things are, not just when a project comes up, but like an annual monitoring program. So.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification of what
Yeah.
system.
Yeah,
Thank
so,
you.
so that's the long version. The
Yeah.
bullet point version on PowerPoint was
Yeah.
the system.
Okay, so that is all the one, oh, I'm sorry, was there any other questions?
So, the travel demand management just went through council and got approved.
Yeah, I believe it was a first reading. I believe it's an ordinance, and an ordinance does not get approved with one reading. I think it gets read, and then 30 days later, if I'm not mistaken, it gets, it goes for a second reading, and then it's approved.
So what, when it says review following plans and programs like the TDM, were we supposed to review it before it goes to council, or where are we giving our input if they're already approving it in 30 days?
You were not asked to provide input on the
Okay.
TDM. It went to council without coming here. So if this were to have passed before that, it was in our work plan, it would have come here before it went to council. That was out of our control. Our group did not shepherd the TDM, so I can't tell you why, but it didn't come to us. And it's now, if I read it correctly, it's gone to council, but it hasn't been approved. Is that, I don't know if anybody else has any input on that, but I
Right,
can
they
find out
had
about
some
that.
changes, they wanted to include buses and schools and,
Yeah,
okay. Because that was actually one of my questions for the end, but I guess we can discuss more about it afterwards.
yeah, so I'm just, to be clear, we can't discuss the TDM going to city council as part of this item to add to the work plan, but in your commissioner comments, you can bring it up there and we can
Okay.
take it back up there. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, so, do we go to public comments now? Okay. Anybody that would like to make public comments on this item? Do we have anybody? No? We have no public comments.
Okay.
So, are we now voting or discussing each item?
I think, this is the interesting part. We've done
We're
a lot of.
winging it right now, so we're working on it.
So I changed it, we're now there. We have complete streets capitalized. We have sustainable mobility plan being the
Johnny second.
SMP.
B.
So I will leave it to the chair to direct the discussion, because now I think, from what I just heard, I listened to what you submitted, and I think I somewhat accurately reflected it on these slides. And if not, now's the time to say, make your pitch, I guess, or maybe clarify or go to a little bit more, add some, take some away, because that's a long list. I can tell you right now, we are not gonna have that many things on this year's work plan. It's just more than you can do in 1 month, 1 year. So we will try our best. If you were to say we're good and I'm fine with these bullets, which may, we may add some or not, but we will take that into consideration when we develop our draft report. So anything you can do now to help us whittle that down, or I think we can do a pretty good job of combining the ones we think should be combined, but if you want to give me input on that, you can. So this is just helping us. Anything you want to say now, I'll leave it to the chair to decide how and how much.
So I wish you would have numbered them, because that way it would be easier for us to refer to it. So I think that we should,
If you give me a minute,
oh, it's okay.
It's
I mean,
really
it's up to
easy.
you, but no, don't worry. I think that we should just go one by one first and see if we have any additions to it. Especially from my understanding, you guys already submitted through email any suggestions that you have. But just in case you have anything, after you saw what we have, we go through it and see if anybody has any additions to it. And then we're gonna go through it and see if we want to, if you don't support any of the bullet points, like strongly don't support it. And then we go from there. What do you think, Don?
I think that's great. I
Okay.
don't think the numbers are gonna work out too.
Oh, that's fine.
I thought it was gonna be easier.
So, Commissioner Perez, do you have anyone that you would like to add? Anything on top of the ones that we have on the list?
Chairman, I think just in regards to the review policies regarding shared transportation services and review current prohibitions of bike use on sidewalks, I think we should combine that. And also maybe further investigate in regards to the services part for shared transportation, but also muni or codes for bike/e-bikes/scooters in regards to what's the code for that, yeah.
So you like that? Okay. Commissioner Lindsay?
So, excuse me, one of the things I wanted to provide feedback on was the expanded duties of the Traffic Safety Commission. And I mentioned earlier that I wanted to try to persuade people maybe to do, not necessarily lump all this stuff together and try to do perhaps some of the municipal code and bylaws approaches before the work plan rather than after. I could be persuaded otherwise, but I look back at the City Council's goals workshop. It was held on March 20th of 2018, so almost a year ago. And at that meeting is when they said that they wanted to amend the duties of the Traffic Safety Commission to cover the entire implementation of the mobility element. And the goal was that, their goal was that we would, that would be accomplished by April of 2019, so next month. And so I don't know what's been going on for the past year because I haven't been paying as close attention, and now I've been appointed, so now it's back on my radar. I really feel that we should set the expanded duties of the Traffic Safety Commission, rename ourselves. In that goals discussion, they said maybe Mobility Commission would be a better name for this commission. And then I made a note about the council meeting that you referred to earlier, where the City Council effectively has now adopted the Transportation Demand Management Plan, and that's one of the major elements of the mobility element. So logically, if a year ago they said we should be implementing the mobility element, of which the transportation demand management was a major component, then logically this commission should have been reviewing that before it went to the council. So I don't know if there's something we want to do about that at this point. I don't necessarily have any problems with it, it's probably fine, but it seems like this commission should have reviewed that before it went to the council. So to prevent more of these things that are going to bypass us, if it takes us 6 months or 8 months or whatever, however many months to fully develop this work plan, we don't want all these other things then to go around us as if we're only doing the safety part. So ideally, we would go ahead and get the municipal code portion done now. And on a related matter, as someone who has been on the other side of the microphone and trying to get the attention of the Traffic Safety Commission or the City Council, I have a bunch of suggestions on how I think we could improve public input. And I don't know, I can spend a few minutes on it, I'll try to be brief, but I think this is another thing that we could do more rapidly rather than waiting until the full work plan gets done. So right now, for my reading of the procedures, is that we get the meeting agendas 1 week in advance of the meeting and the public gets them 3 days in advance. I didn't say anything about when the agenda packets would be available though. The current procedure also allows for 3 minutes of public testimony, bracketed by rounds of what's called questioning, questions to staff by the commission members, and then any additional materials that are presented are available for inspection at city offices by the public. And Doug referred to this earlier, it's unclear to me whether individual commissioners can have topics placed on meeting agendas. So my proposal is that we put into either the municipal code or our bylaws or rules and regulations, whatever we're calling them, we pass a resolution that would make these meetings more efficient, as efficient as possible, but still comply with the Brown Act, but encourage public participation. So first, have the agenda packets available online to both commissioners and the public 7 days before the meeting, and many thanks to Mr. Bilsey for this week. It's great to have that 7 days in advance so we have time to look through it. I'm sure some of them are really, hundreds of pages long, so we want to have access to them 7 days in advance. Then allow both individual commissioners and the public to submit written comments and questions, which could be included in additional materials online link, and that's what the City Council currently does. So that we as commissioners then, if the public, they can come in and talk for 3 minutes, but it's much easier if it's a complicated topic for me to have it written down, who's requesting it. It's hard for me to take notes really fast. So if the public can submit comments and then we can make those available online as additional materials. And if we as commissioners have anything we want to add in that we want to put in the public record, we could do that. And then make it clear that in the rules that after the public opinion has been taken, that commissioners can then share their opinions, and I guess that's what I'm doing right now. So I think that is allowed, but in the bylaws right now, for some reason it just says only ask questions of staff instead of saying that we can have a discussion. So include that formally in there. And then also mirror City Council meeting rules by allowing individual commissioners to put items on an agenda. So if any of us wants to put an item on the agenda, we could have that right. That's what City Council members can currently do. And then finally, also mirror the City Council meeting, the City Council standard by having a web page available where the agendas, the agenda packets, any additional materials, and then those other materials that are available for inspection at city offices currently, and the minutes after they're approved, all of those would be like on one web page so that everyone can see it all organized on one page rather than having to try to go into the city records and find all these individual components. So that's the idea then would be to put this into our bylaws or refer to the city code. And then so that's sort of the process areas that I had ideas on. The actual, and those I think would behoove us to do those sooner rather than later. And then as far as the other bullet points here, I had a couple of comments on some of these, or several of these are mine, on the planning, implementation, and monitoring of projects. So I'm just gonna kind of give my, if you'll give me the time here, just to kind of quickly give my impression of things, or sort of some examples of my current feelings about vehicles versus pedestrians versus bicycles. So, just as an example, if you had a 4-lane street that had less than 10,000 cars a day on it, that's an excellent candidate for converting vehicle lanes into dedicated bike lanes. If on the other hand you have that same 4-lane street that has 25,000 vehicles per day, then probably we would want to stick with smaller or shared bike lanes. And then everything sort of in the middle, I think it's our job, duty, to look at the level of service and safety that's going on with all of those modes of transportation, and then carefully plan a study to project how it could be affected by a project, and then have a plan to monitor the performance of that going forward. And for those things, we need a number of things, including using validated, having staff use level of service and safety assessment methods that are validated and not unique to Carlsbad, as we have currently. They provide valid data, things like that. So a lot of my bullet points are related to sort of that process, where we've got some situations where there aren't conflicts between modes of transportation. It's really clear that we should just go ahead and make it better for the modes that are, taking the level of service is the predominant factor. It's those ones in the middle, or you could also apply these same approaches to the transportation management, the TDM projects that go on. You could monitor how well they're working using these types of methods. So that's just sort of an overview of my feelings on this.
Yeah, and I think the bullet points, from what I've seen, we agree that it makes sense to put it on there. One thing that I can speak of, to put things on the agenda, we do have the way we've been doing it. If I want to put something on the agenda, I will bring it up, and then we will all vote to see if it's something to put on the agenda or not. So that's what, and it's been pretty smooth to put anything on the agenda. On the other side is, I do agree, and I guess we can do a vote or consensus if we should do the bylaws first, because I have the same feeling, and it's not the first time that we're kind of getting the go-around when it comes to things that have been approved that had to do with traffic and transportation, and we were not included. So I think doing the bylaws before we do this plan, I think if it takes shorter period of time, I think is not a bad idea.
Yeah, and I think the idea is that they're going to be brought to you in the different packages, so we didn't want to put the chicken before, the cart before the horse. I got the wrong metaphor, sorry. So if it's your desire, perhaps I can interpret this to say, maybe the next step is to go into those 3 buckets and bring it back to you and say, here's some ideas we have for bylaws, this is the ideas we have for Unicode, and here's the ideas we have for the work plan. And not put in the work plan to, not unnecessarily put something in a work plan so that we have to get that approved before we move on. So move on as quickly as we can on all 3 items. And if don't have one, hold up the other. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, if that's fair enough.
With the knowledge that the city council wanted us to complete the conversion to a mobility commission by April, so the sooner the better, I think.
Well, is that something that is true? Because you have not give us a time frame, so.
Yeah, sometimes those let's put it this way, I think the intent was there, it's been written down, then sometimes, it's done in a public meeting, and then it comes to the reality of what staff resources are there, so we have put this as a high priority, and I think that the date could be correct, but I don't want to misinterpret that on you know, what the status of that is. You know, it might have been stated, but I think the point is we have to get this moving soon. And if I could, I think if I could springboard off that, I could help you maybe, because it just came to me, that if I were to interpret what I heard tonight, what would be really good is if then the next step is we go back as staff and see which of these items are very strongly and clearly put into the mobility element. So if I hear of the several things that Steve said, one thing that, like the level of service, well, there is an item in the mobility element that says that the level of service will be consistent with the highway capacity manual, which addresses your point. So there are some things that are directly and clearly put in the mobility element of things that need action. And I think those should be our highest priority
Well,
on
I do
these.
feel, and I don't know if you guys feel the same, but I do feel that our bullet points were based on our previous experience as traffic safety commissioners,
Mhm.
not mobility. So are we making this plan just with our experience and knowledge and suggestions just on traffic safety commission, and then we're gonna change just our name, but then it's not gonna include the mobility because we have not
I think,
included that?
yeah, I think it's just, we've been acting like a mobility commission. So I don't think we need to really change, we're just gonna validate that by, or acknowledge it by changing the name. So right now, I don't see the change in the Muni code changing of what we do, but let's say in this work plan, once we have this here, that probably clarifies it. If you wanted to add something on this bullet that was kind of stretching what we consider mobility or safety or something like that, you know, so I think from what we hear, we can kind of go forward with the mobility or the Muni code issues, if that's fair, and we can kind of say, okay, let's call ourselves, if what I heard was we should be the mobility or the mobility safety commission, then we can kind of proceed with that part of that effort, and then we can kind of look at what our roles and responsibilities should be.
Right,
terms
that's
of
what
that.
I wanna make sure, that we're not missing anything and write this big plan and then we're missing this big part that we do not know that it was our role.
Along with that, what Steve said, I think we have 3 buckets, but I think our primary bucket is the bylaws because right now, we are not authorized to do anything except safety, but we're trying to meet the goal of mobility. So it's easy to change the title, but I think we need to go along with the bylaws and the duties within a mobility, not just a namesake. So,
Yeah, and with that in mind, I'm not going to take anything off here.
right.
And I'm not gonna do any action that would
Right.
conflict about it, so we might be semantics, but we will get to the bylaws and we'll get to the Muni code, but I won't throw out anything. We won't develop the work plan with any constraints. And then, when we get the work plan, we'll say, okay, if this is our work plan, how do we make it happen in terms of changing the Muni code and changing the bylaws? That's kind of the thinking, but I'm okay with what you're saying, and it could be parallel paths, but you know, we didn't want to get caught up on is it safety, is it not? We wanted everything out there on these bullets, and I think they transcend safety. So from what I heard, one of these recommendations is to change the name to Mobility Commission. Maybe we can proceed with that if that was strong enough.
So that was my item, but then the follow-up on it was that we then follow what the city council said the mobility commission should be, which was to handle the implementation of all aspects of the mobility element. So again, the alarming thing to me was the fact that just a week ago, the city council was given this TDM plan that they approved that this commission never saw. So I guess the question is there any reason that this commission couldn't have reviewed that based on how the municipal code is written? And your point about the bylaws, I would say that this is actually a municipal code thing, because it's the municipal code that says the duties. And the duties right now just say safety. So to me, it seems like it's the municipal code that would need to be changed to say that we're changing the duties of this commission to oversee all aspects of implementation of the mobility element. And then the city council would have to vote to approve that change in the ordinance. So that's going to take a few months. And the fear is that it's going to take 3, 4, 5 months, even if we start right now, even if we write it today, it's going to take months to get that in the municipal code. Can we not hear those things in front of our commission before that's changed? Or do we have, do you understand what I'm?
If I could, that priority for the city council has already been made. And we've already been directed to do that. So I think a message would be loud and clear if this commission, maybe not as part of this item, but on commissioner reports, separates the TDM and asks us to give us a little bit of direction on the TDM and how that was handled, and what your desire is, and then I can take that as a separate item, because I think that is a good example of what would ideally have happened, and I can't explain why it didn't come here, but I think if in your commission, if you make the right motion to direct me to follow up on that, to ensure that that doesn't happen again while we work through this, I think that'll, like I said, it'll be hopefully a clear message.
And we can make that
I'd
motion.
like to make a motion on what he just said.
Or do we do that in the comments?
Okay.
Hey, you do it right now?
Yeah.
Yes, well, yeah, this is a strange item, so
I'll second
it
it.
is something, if
The motion can be done at any time. during
Hold
the
on just a second.
meeting. So do I just, I make that motion.
Yes, you did, and I heard a second down there.
I second.
Commissioner.
Oh, who's second?
I second.
Linky, okay.
if I, let me try to put it,
Yes, but it's the same
in
procedure.
clear words.
Yeah,
I am hearing that the Traffic Safety Commission would like staff to review the process that was used to review the travel demand management ordinance, and with a strong recommendation that it should have come to the Traffic Safety Commission before going to City Council. And if there's anything that can be done, we will try to do that.
Good job.
Again, though, so that was just an example, and I appreciate the motion and the vote. So that's just an example, though, of why I think we need to get that municipal code changed. That's the primary goal there, not necessarily to review the TDM, but to
So
get
what
the
do we have to do to
Well,
stop?
that's a good question, and I understand and I hear it, and I'm not sure the pace for any of these. So I'm not sure when the city council wants a work plan in front of them, and I don't know when they want a muni code in front of them. But I do know we can do the bylaws, but I would not do the bylaws until the city council does the muni codes related to them. So I can tell you right now, I think it would be spinning wheels if we did any bylaws right now, because I think the council is trying to uniform that. So I would say we may do that work and then end up negating it. So I believe that I would put at the far end. The muni code, I think we can work with these parallel and just see which one the council wants to take. Because just when we get done with it here, that doesn't necessarily mean it goes straight to the council. They may have a certain priority on muni code changes and another one on work plans. So I think we've heard clear from the commissioners that we should not hold up one hostage versus the other and work diligently on all three accounts. And we will do that.
And can we have a gentleman's agreement that if there's a mobility element related item of business being proposed, maybe for city council, that even before that ordinance gets passed, expanding our duties to what the council wanted, that they would still come before us? Or are we not allowed to discuss those things until the ordinance is passed?
Only if it's extended to ladies.
So is there any way?
I think that's the message. Like I said, I think that's a clear message, and I will take that, and if we have a problem with making sure that mobility-related issues come here, I will bring it back to you. Otherwise, consider that a strong message for us to respond to. Does that
Thanks.
address your issue?
Yeah.
But is there any way that commissioners or commissions ever meet with the council? So we can relate our ideas, opinions?
I believe this is what it is. I think, and it's a challenge because I don't know of where this work plan originated, but I think in concept, as I read, it's to increase a dialogue or to generate a dialogue between commissions, because it's very hard for 7 people to go meet 5 people. And that it just can't happen. So how do you exchange information? How does the council know about your concerns? And I think that's what it is. It's let's develop a work plan. And that's why you get to approve the work plan. It's not council, the staff does not approve the work plan, you do. So it doesn't go forward until you approve it. So that's telling the council, this is what we find to be our priorities for the next 12 months.
Right, but then the council needs to approve it, and we cannot say of why we think that should be that there or not. So we can't
I believe
rebuttal
oh,
of why. Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't want to talk over you, go ahead.
So, from my understanding, we put together the work plan, right, of what we think that should be and shouldn't be and what we should do. And then it's gonna go to council, and then they will either approve some of the stuff or not approve it. And we're not gonna be able to explain to them of why we think that portion that they didn't approve because they didn't think is important, was important for us as the Traffic and Mobility Safety Commission.
My understanding is that we would like the chair or another spokesperson from the Traffic Safety Commission to come with us when it goes in front of the council. So one or more of you would be the spokesperson, people. So if they did have questions, we would have a representative from the TSC. So that's our intent, and ideally you would have somebody come with us so that if there were questions, we wouldn't have to speak for you. But again, all 7 of you can't come in, and we would have to do it in a meeting. So ideally, if you embrace what we have, or if you have concerns, but that's the only way, because again, consensus is tougher now with 7 people than it was with 5, but it's doable. And if we come up with something that everybody embraces and loves, then it's going to be very easy. Otherwise, we might have to have a little bit of a meeting to say, okay, what as a commission do we want to say about this work plan that we built consensus on? Is that fair?
Along those lines, I had seen a bullet previously stating that they wanted to have a report, maybe on a quarterly basis, to the city council, and we could add those issues or concerns that we would like to be forwarded to. I think the bullet said for public input, but you could say, for the last 6 months, we wanted Hope Elementary to have some sort of safety guard. And that was one of the issues that we would report to the city council.
That the intent is that periodic
Yes, he did.
reports will
Go to the
council. I would imagine you would have great input on that, and that's your dialogue.
Yeah.
To say we are excited, or we're concerned that we're not making enough progress, or
Exactly.
we didn't make enough progress on this one. So yes, that is the idea. And then again, they read the minutes here, so they can listen to 2 minutes or we can actually do a report. So I believe that's the intent, is that dialogue happens in a formal report.
Okay.
I have one thing to ask. I apologize for interrupting, but Commissioner Hunter made a motion to review the process of TDM ordinance. Commissioner Linky, second, gonna get it, but we didn't have the vote.
Right.
Can we vote?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you for stopping us.
Sorry.
I would have stopped you.
Please note that it passed 6-1 with 1 absent. Okay, so, I think the discussion was pretty good. It's much better than any other discussion we had about the work plan. So what about any bullet points that any of you believe that should not be on here?
Or we still doing on there, aren't we?
Or you still have them?
Yeah,
Yeah.
That was all me.
Stop at Steve over there, so.
My apologies. Commissioner Pensier, do you have anything you would like to add to the bullet points?
Yeah, right now we have 3 buckets. And I've been involved with the League of American Bicyclists for a bunch of years. And they have 5 E's that they use. And currently, actually, they added a 6th one. And I'd like us to at least think about the other ones, because when I see the things we're talking about, I don't see that all of them fit necessarily into those 3. So we might want to think about the other 3. One of them is evaluation, where you would look and see whether or not you have a safety issue. For example, I mean, you have to do some kind of evaluation of crashes to be able to say that, you know, what do you need to do? You need to determine the cause and so forth, root cause analysis. Another is encouragement. You know, the Climate Action Plan requires us to do a bunch of things, it's law. And in order to encourage people to do something other than grab the keys every time they want to go somewhere, you have to encourage the alternate modes of transportation, walking, transit, and cycling. So that could be a part of our, if we're going to talk about mobility, that could be a bucket that we have. Another is simply equality, and that I think is mentioned in one of these anyway. So
I've heard it.
I suppose we think about adding those. If these are something that we made up and it wasn't something that was told to us by the city council.
Good? Commissioner Hunter?
Yeah, I think, I see a lack of alternative transportation, electric vehicles and those types of things anywhere in here, so mobility, as we go more and more electric, it's, you know, charging stations all the way to, you know, how are they gonna operate on the roads? We have golf cart ordinances, and some are legal, some are not legal, how they're doing that, and I think we need to look at, and that definitely goes into education. I see golf carts on 40-mile-an-hour roads, and no, you can't do that. So I think there's something in there. And we'll get to what we don't want in the next round here. Oh, okay, cool. I'm going to make a comment though on, it's not a not, but the equalize the rights of roadway users. I don't think it's equal, I think it's more harmonious. As whoever said it was saying, if you got 25,000, 30,000 cars a day going down the road, and you got 4 bikes, it's not equal.
Right.
It's an evaluation is what it is. So the equal thing, it's a bad word. To me, it's a bad word. I talked about people talking about work-life balance. I don't like to use the word balance. It sounds like it's 50-50. That's where harmony comes in there. It's work-life harmony. You know, some people like to work more than others. So I don't know what the right word is in there, but.
I think that the complete streets goes into really, you know,
Yeah.
I think if I could interject that a lot of this is in the mobility element as complete streets, which encourage, you know, there's a lot of these issues, so we'll have to weave that in, but if that helps you.
Yeah, no, it's in the complete streets there. It's just in front of the, you know, we have our commissioners here. And, I think sometimes we run way too fast to the bike side of the house. And I was a big biker for a long, long time. And, you know, the biggest, well, it used to be the biggest issue in Carlsbad was traffic. So then keeping traffic in the name somewhere is probably a good idea, because that's the biggest issue. So, you know, it's like we can run all the way to the bicyclist side and everybody's walking and biking, and then the traffic will just get worse. And so Yeah. There's a big issue with mobility and how we do it and how we do it smart. And I'm a total proponent for bike people too, so. Yeah. Anyway, that was the only ad I had at this point.
Vice Chair Johnson?
To kind of go along with what Steve had said earlier, you didn't know, but several months ago, I recommended having like a website or a calendar, agenda calendar be put on the city's website. And it was told that we already sent out multitude emails to several people. My problem with that is that's for people that are, all of a sudden, they have a problem and they're not on that email list. I do like your idea of adding some sort of online agenda, because I know, according to the Brown Act, we have to publicly post the agenda out there so many days beforehand. But I would like to see the agenda placed on the website so that we could encourage input from the public. Because a lot of people, and let me put it this way, in some cities, they put on the website, and this is outside of the traffic commission, this would be more for the city manager's level. They put a 30-day calendar and saying on this day is commission, this day is planning, this day is the beach, blah, blah, blah. And you can go click on that day and it will refer you to whatever applicable commission was. And I kind of like that because then it's to not just a segregated part of the community, but it's to everybody. If they want to get involved, this would be a way to do it.
Do we not have the agenda on the website right now?
We do.
We
It is on
do.
the website.
But you have to search for it.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing, if I could, again, at a level that I would think the work plan would be
Mhm.
develop you know, when we say website, and I don't want to, I'm not the best technical person, but a page, you know, maybe we have an item to work on a web page that's dedicated to mobility issues, including clear
That would be good.
direction to TSC items and schedule, if that meets your direction. Because I keep hearing that woven into a couple things. So if I do that and put that as an item in and of itself, it would be a web page as opposed to traffic being in a lot of different places. You'd know right where to go, you'd know right where it leads you to the TSC.
Yeah. It's there, but it's not easy to find. Another thing I would like to add to the agenda presentation or portion is we don't have a running total of previous action items that have come before the group, such as you had an issue on Melrose, I believe. I had an issue on the bike lane, the traffic lane in front of Costco. Those have been in prior months, but what's happened is kind of give us a status of what's going on so that nothing is forgotten about. Swept aside, forgotten, all revoked.
Or swept aside, yeah.
Or swept aside.
Well, again, yeah, message received, although, you know, when they come up, we can't guarantee you that it'll be back the next month.
Oh, no,
And
no, I
sometimes it
understand
does
that.
take it, so a status would
A
say.
status report of all those things, you know, in work, whatever,
Message received.
okay.
Okay, I have no additions to the bullets, so now we're gonna go back and see if you want strongly, you believe any of the bullets should not be on there.
Question on this, if the previous motion that we passed, so if that passed, can we move some of these bullet points, or, because we set forth that, so do we move any of that, or do we just keep with this? Does that make sense?
Could I maybe ask, maybe we've gone a long time, maybe we say high priority, low priority, you know, and instead of removing it, you know, if you want to make a comment on what's a low priority and maybe limit it to maybe a couple things that you think are low priority, a couple things you think are high priority. And that would launch us, I think, in the right
So do you
direction.
want more there? I mean, when I said strongly believe that shouldn't be out there, I personally don't have anything that I don't believe should be on here. So I don't think maybe 1 or 2 points. So do you want us to narrow these bullet points now based on that? Or if we believe everything should be on here and we go to the next step?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, is the next step would be, if you wish, maybe in closing, so we can bring this to a close, because again, you're gonna have another bite at the apple. So, maybe just at this point, if you so desire, you can say, okay, here's a couple that I like, here's a couple that, we can either put off till next year or not such a high priority, and we'll move on.
We can, I'm not sure how I personally don't know if I had enough time to see the other bullet points that I have not suggested. So yes, of course, I'm gonna support mine, but I think the other ones are good too. And I'm not sure if right now we can make that decision of which one is high and which one is low. Unless you guys have different, please.
No, I agree with you. I think it's going to be longer than what we have here. I did like your suggestion of possibly numbering the bullets so that when we go into prioritizing or high-low category, whatever you want to say, you could go by numbers and easier to digest. I only have one item that I would think should be removed, but I'd rather hear from the other people first.
Chairwoman, I just say, for me, I'm good with the ones right now.
Okay.
I think we discussed that several of them probably could be combined, so that'll shorten the list a little bit. We also talked about the coastal corridor master plan. It's a great idea, and I support it. But if it's too ambitious for this work plan, then it could wait, unless it can combine several bullet points. But I think the process ones that I suggested, again, I'm going to repeat that I think we should do those sooner rather than later and separate them from the work plan. And you could include in the work plan developing an ordinance and our bylaws, but I think that those should come immediately. The one thing I had a little concern about, so when I saw Vision Zero, I read some stuff online about it. And the goals of it, I have no problem with, and we should do everything we can to reduce collisions and fatalities. But I did see a lot of pushback from people in communities where it was implemented, and I don't know what the implications are of using that language. So one option would be to implement things that are consistent with Vision Zero, but not necessarily call it Vision Zero, so that we don't have an unrealistic expectation where people are going to say, well, see, you didn't meet your goal. Or there are just some people who might not like that, or they'll look it up and they'll say, I don't like how that worked out in other cities. It might polarize people a bit, so we could implement the things rather than calling it Vision Zero. I was a little bit concerned when I saw that it said something like any street with a bike lane should have a speed limit of less than 20 miles per hour or something. It's not a protected bike lane, so I don't know that, like if you look at, and I don't know if this would really apply, but if you look at El Camino Real or something, where it's got sort of not a big bike lane, but we've got 3 lanes of traffic carrying 50,000 cars a day. If we do Vision Zero, does that mean that the speed limit there would have to be reduced to 20 miles per hour to meet that expectation? So I just don't want to, and I understand that that's not the intent of it, but I just caution us in saying Vision Zero. Other than that, I guess I could probably go through. I don't like to prioritize because these are people's ideas, and of course I think mine are good too. They're all good as far as I'm concerned, including Vision Zero. So.
Great, Commissioner Vincent.
The issue that, let's see, I guess it would be about the third one down, traffic calming on non-residential streets, which isn't in the current plan. And the reason I added that is because of the concern around schools, especially, most of the people that have come to our commission in several different ways have been parents of school kids in the area around the high school, Valley Middle School, Magnolia Elementary. And tonight we're going to have a little discussion on Hope Elementary. And basically what we have is chaos every morning around our schools. I think the police will agree with that. And we have fewer and fewer people that are willing to let their kids get to school any other way but in the safety of their own vehicle, which defeats the purpose of trying to reduce the number of collisions that take place. You put more cars on the road, you're going to have more collisions, et cetera. So, and not being able to have the tool to provide traffic calming on a street that is around the school, to me, it doesn't make any sense. And so that's the reason I thought we ought to at least include those areas. So Tamarack and some of the other streets in that area that have a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit instead of a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit could use some traffic calming to bring things down to a reasonable level so that people feel more comfortable in allowing their kids that want to ride their bikes to school to actually do it rather than stuffing them into their cars and joining the chaos every morning and afternoon. So that.
Do you want to remove that item?
No.
Or you want to keep it? Because we're at the removal stage.
Are we at the removal level?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Is there any
I don't wanna
item
remove
you
that. I thought we were going through the
strongly-
ones that were important to us.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
so we stated that all of them are important unless one of us says that strongly we believe this one, which I don't see any, but I just want to give everybody a
Okay, I'm
chance.
sorry. I got off on it.
But you have 3 points.
You've never done that before, though.
Of course not.
Commissioner Hunter,
Me now, so.
finally.
I actually agree with Steve on the part that I think developing the coastal corridor master plan for this coming year is above the scope. So while I think it's a great idea, I think it looks to be a longer term deal than the current deal. I think we can keep it in the scope, in the plan at some point, but trying to jump in there with all this other stuff we're trying to do and add mobility in is there. I have an issue with the ad hoc committees. I don't think it's defined. I don't see us doing it. I know engineering does it already. They go out there and build consensus before they bring anything to the board. So I don't know why commissioners would be involved in that. So it's not a big negative. Would it be, if it stays on there, that's fine, but I don't see where it needs to be there. And that was the only one. Everything else, I mean, there's something else on here for a reason, so.
Good. Commissioner?
Don't have too much. The only thing when I read conduct educational events, I thought they were talking about us doing it. So just as a clarification, I would say something like work closely with the PD in conducting those things, just to clarify it that.
Or bike organizations or everybody.
Or
yeah,
anybody, yeah. But the only one that I really would say I wouldn't want on there is to look at letting bicyclists ride on the sidewalks, because that seems to contradict with our safety and issues for pedestrians as well with anybody. I did read online an article that the new LA Times were talking about how various cities, because the state law does not have a one code fits all type thing, the cities are allowed to determine it. And some cities say you can't do it in a commercial area, some say you can't do it in this area. And how does a bicyclist know which area they're in? So it's just counterproductive to our goal is safety and all. And I'm glad to see that.
Well, it doesn't say changes, it says review the
Right,
procedures.
so, yeah, from what I understood from the discussions that we have is we want to make sure that, for example, the roundabout intersection that the bicycle was encouraged to go on the sidewalk, they need to be safe too, right? So we're just reviewing it. We're not going to approve or we're not going to propose that that will happen. It's just we're going to review to see, okay, where is it safe for both? That's the way I am interpreting it, unless you guys interpret it different. And
I just took it as current prohibits. So that sounded very negative to me.
I think what I heard is that it would be a review of muni codes related to all modes, and let's just take a look if it could be better worded. So if it's perfect the way it is, it's perfect the way it is, and
Okay,
maybe
and
it's
that's-
Yeah,
A review level, that's fine.
because it could be scooters, could be electric scooters, could be bikes, could be all sorts of
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
We want to take a look at all of that, so.
so next step we're gonna get, is that when we're gonna do high priority and low priority? I would think that would be,
Let me ask for your input on this. We heard a lot. And I know there's a lot more we could talk about. I don't know how much of value it would be. So I would look for your direction to say, do you need this to come back, or would you rather us take what we have, come up with a work plan, and then you have something with some meat on it to deal with? Or do you want to still continue before we work on it? I would like you guys to, you commissioners, to give us a little bit of direction on that. If you need to see this again, or have you talked enough tonight to give us enough direction that you feel comfortable with us coming back with a work plan?
taking consideration the time frame, and that we have been going back and forth or discussing about it for a while now. I would agree with that. I would agree to see it as a draft, because I do agree with the points. I only point, like the two commissioners said, was the developing the coastal corridor. I think at this point, it's way too much for us to worry about, but we can put it there as a future item. We can go to comments and see how do you guys feel. Would you like to see a draft coming back, or would you like to high, low priority next time?
For me, I would like to see a draft.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it sounds like it's time for a draft. If you've been working on this, this is my first look at it, so.
This is our first look at it, but from what you're stating and from what it seems, there is a time of the essence. This is the first time we actually got something, I don't know, clear and that has some meat to it. We have been just discussing, there is a work plan, and we have been sending in our bullet points, as you've seen, but that was it until today. So you are pretty much in it with all of us.
Okay. To belabor my point, I would again suggest that we have the separate, like, have staff bring back a proposed ordinance, if possible, and perhaps bylaws, as well as a draft of a work plan. And ideally, again, it would, if it's available 7 days in advance, I would be pleased to see that, and I would go through it, and I'd be more, knowing that we want to finalize things, I would be very thorough in going through it and providing suggestions on deletions or additions or combinations at that point. I wasn't prepared to like start throwing people's ideas out tonight, so, but if, next month, if that could be done, that'd be great.
So would that be something doable for staff to come back with?
I think if you know, where I see this going, but I'll wait for the other forum commissioners to speak, but, you know, we may not have every I dotted and T crossed, you know, so the next time you would see it, if you want, we would come up with something, like you said, with meat on it. So it may not be ready for approval the next time, but you have something more to discuss.
Right,
To
but
say,
what
you know
about
what, we
the
took the shot at taking
finance?
these 20 bullets and putting it into a subset of it, and you talk about it that way as opposed to prioritizing and then handing the prioritization to us. We have a lot of information right now that has really been helpful in a guidance.
And what about the bylaws? That's just,
We can go parallel on that, and
and you can bring it next time?
I don't want to promise next month, but that will be a request to get that done on a parallel process and not hold one hostage to the other. So we will work on all three independently with the resources we have and not put one as contingent on the other.
Okay. Commissioner Pensier.
Nothing further at this point.
So you'd like to see the draft
draft, yeah.
coming? Okay.
Draft, give us the meat.
Draft as well. Okay. So, that being said, we are ready for the draft.